Alright, so I finished the left side upper and lower control arm. Now moving on to the right side, I've already placed the lower control arm. It's the same on both ends. The only difference for replacing the upper control arm is that instead we have the air box in the way. So we'll have to remove that, and it's just one nut here, and then we have slightly better access to this nut on this end. And then I'll go ahead and remove the air lines, signal connectors, and clamping bolts on the top of the air strut. And this nut is a 10mm and it's plastic. And then the air box simply lifts up and out. And then we'll move the SBC pump out of the way, starting with the ground terminal, which is on the left side. And this bolt is captive on the electrical cable. Move that out. And then the positive, which is also captive. And then the last 10mm bolt, or excuse me, nut that clamps down the battery in place. And once that nut is off, lift the clamp up and over, make sure the cables are out of the way, and pull the battery up and out. So this passenger side is much easier. I managed to get a 16mm wrench on this side. You can see it's holding on the nut right there. And then on the bottom, I also have another 16mm wrench and they're holding it. And then as I turn from the top, this bottom wrench holds in place up against here. And I'm able to remove the nut that way. And I did the same for the opposite side. I managed to get a wrench on there and then a wrench on the bottom and then just twist. And I did tape the wrench on there to just keep it in place to prevent it from falling down. So now I've got the top bolts loosened up and I have enough room to pull those bolts out through the back, and I have this ratchet strap on the top of the spindle just to prevent it from falling too far forward, because that could cause damage to the CV axles and the boots. And I still do have the bottom bolt and nut for the lower part of the strut connected, so hopefully I don't have to take that out. And I also do have skinny enough hands that I can fit in through here and pull the bolts out through the top here. Let me try this one. Damn. There goes the control arm. So I've got the old lower control or upper control arm out. I got the new one right here with the level sensor bracket in place and a new bolt, and then I'm just going to slide it in and hold it in there temporarily. I can put my hand here through the top. There we go. I'll try the other side. New bolt with the washer already on the bolt side. There we go. Yeah, it doesn't seem like you need to remove the upper strut to gain access to the bolts. Alright, so I was able to install the both bolts, and I have them just barely snug enough to where I can still move this up and down, and it'll hold in place but not so tight that it'll tear the rubber. And then I have now set this to my measured height to as it was before, so this is now my riding height, so now I can torque these down. So with the strut mount kind of out of the way, I was able to use this flex head ratchet to reach in through here and hold onto that bolt while using a 16mm wrench to access that nut on the other side. And I also do have access to the other side of the bolt and nut. And I can't actually torque this down since I don't have the Mercedes specified tool, so I'm just going to get it good and tight, but Mercedes specifies 50 Newton meters. Alright, so the upper control arm is torqued down. I'm going to put the battery back on. Negative post goes to the left. Make sure not to squeeze the other battery cable. There we go. And then I drew on Sharpie on the top right here, 2/19. That's for the second week of the 2019 year. That's just to help me remember in the future when I need to replace this, since that sticker was on the back side and it's not visible. So that was a good time to write that on there. And I'll just start it by hand. And gotta take out top washer and nut. Careful not to drop it. And that's all I can reach. I'll tighten these down. Go. And then the air box is next. Get those hooks lined up at the top. Got my nut right here. And again, it's a plastic nut. Don't need very much. There we go. Now I have the air strut back up into place, and I just used a jack on the very bottom of the axle here, and I made sure to line it up as I was pushing it up. I'll put the bracket back in place, the one that goes to the rear. The one towards the front gets a washer and a nut. And then these top nuts get torqued down to 30 Newton meters. Something like that. So I just got it started there by hand. And that's it. And of course, the electrical connector. Perfect. So now I'll jack up the axle some more to get the spindle and upper control arm connected at this upper ball joint. Alright, I got the nuts started, so now I can tighten it up. So now I just need to connect the level sensor back on. And there is a little flat spot right here on the back to hold the bolt in place, and it is an 8mm. So go ahead and connect that. And then I'll hold it with an 8mm and then use the 10mm to tighten down the nut. There we go. Climb the axle to get it up to my riding height of 15 inches. And now I need to torque down the bolt that connects the strut to the lower control arm, and that goes torque down to 162 Newton meters. So I'm just gonna get it tight like this. I'm holding the bolt end in place while tightening down the nut end. Okay, now I can go ahead and switch over to my torque wrench. Let's get one more click. And then you can rotate this tie rod end around to give you a little bit more room. Go ahead and install my sway bar link. We want the pokey parts pointed towards the front, along with this flat part pointed towards the front of the vehicle. Even then, once this gets tightened, it can swivel along the ball joint in here, so it really doesn't matter. But might as well start it off like that. And that is an 18mm nut. There we go. And then that gets torqued down to 95 Newton meters. So I'll counter hold it with the 5mm Allen on top, and then an 18mm wrench. Go. Good and tight. And put the cables back onto the sway bar link.